It was in my biology class last fall semester at SASU that I was taught the true nature of our planet's health, and boy, is it true shocking. Our professor made us read shocking scholarly articles regarding how numerous environmental scientists are now in agreement of the worldwide threat that climate change now poses to our planet's stability, and how our world politicians now share such a consensus. The reason I ask you all to lend me your ears for the next couple of minutes is because the information I bring regards to the safety and preservation of our species. Point blank, this speech demands to be heard if you are thinking about continuing your family's legacy by having kids. As 21st century parents, you just might birth your kids, your kin, into a world where death is imminent to much of the biodiversity found here on Earth. The claim I'm about to make is quite radical, but I've gathered support from various credible sources, from expert scientists to acknowledged climate change research projects. The time for all humans to reduce their carbon footprints in this planet is nigh. As a community, we must all take it upon ourselves to integrate eco-friendly activities into our daily lives, or perish due to the effects of climate change making our planet no longer habitable. In this speech, I hope to teach you all the current problems regarding climate change, the barriers prohibiting our abilities to combat climate change, and some practical solutions that everyone can utilize starting today to help aid in the fight against climate change. I would like you all to focus your attention on the graphic cited by senior scientific writer Rebecca Lindsay while I read off a quote from UBC scientific journalist Nicole Jones, written in 2017. Last year will go down in history as the year when the planet's atmosphere broke a startling record, 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide. The last time the planet's air was so rich in CO2 was millions of years ago, back when early predecessors to humans were likely wielding stone tools. As we could see, for hundreds of thousands of years, the Earth's atmosphere has maintained a natural CO2 emission and concentration of 300 parts per million, until the recent advent of modern humanity and its industrial revolution caused the emissions to unprecedentedly surmount its long-held thresholds during the last 60 years. This level of carbon concentration in our atmosphere causes the greenhouse gases already naturally present in the air to be in abundance of some natural elements such as carbon dioxide. In abundance, these elements begin trapping more heat than normal from the sun, weakening the ozone layer and ultimately causing the natural disasters posed by climate change. According to Jackson, Kier, Andrew, and the rest of his members in their 2019 Global Carbon Project, climate change has arrived. Weather and climate disasters in the United States cost an estimated $306 billion in 2017, $100 more billion than ever before. CO2 emissions are responsible for most of the climate change that has occurred and will occur, and emissions are rising again. Fossil CO2 emissions increased about 2% in 2018, the second year of growth after 3 previous years of relatively stable emissions. These statistics are current and prelude the natural disasters to come as a result of climate change. Corresponding with the passing of Earth's 300 ppm carbon threshold and the natural disasters that resulted from it is the fact that time is limited to less than 16 years to save the planet from reaching a certain irreversible level of global warming, one that is 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which fosters extreme levels of climate impacts like great ice sheet loss. According to Professors Matthews, Peters, Allens, and Foster in the 2018 update of the climate clock, they state they have created a climate clock counting down until Earth reaches 1.5 degrees Celsius, whose time estimates is sensitive to the uncertainties associated with the climate response to CO2 emissions. Here, we provide a best estimate, which means that there is 50% chance of reaching 1.5 degrees Celsius before the clock's date, and similarly, there is 50% chance that the 1.5 degrees Celsius date will occur later than shown. What's even more shocking is that this estimated time arrival will reach 1.5 degrees Celsius can have a 67% chance of happening earlier in 2030 and not 2034. This would happen if the team wanted to account for time left using a smaller carbon budget estimate, meaning that their statistical models use a lower amount of carbon allowance in the air, 570 billion tons, rather than the IPCC's estimated 707 billion tons, to determine when the Earth will reach global warming 1.5 degrees more than pre-industrial times. Moving on, you all know as well as I do that the cause of climate change is human emissions of greenhouse gases via urbanized activities such as infrastructure and mass transportation. Let's dive deeper on why we have yet to solve such a world-threatening crisis. One of the reasons why we have yet to combat climate change is because there has yet to be a majority consensus on the immediate need to take actions against global warming. A U.S. Washington poll on Americans' views on climate change found that 8 in 10 people believe climate change is being influenced by human activities, but only half of Americans today share the belief that urgent steps must be taken within the next 10 years to avert the worst effects of climate change. This lack of consensus among our populace will never influence our U.S. government to submit to strict climate change prevention agreement plans created by the United Nations. In fact, the main reason why there is yet to be actions legislated to reduce the adverse effects of climate change is due to the inability of the world's main national polluters to use more aggressive climate prevention plans. In support of this assertion is the credible Fox climate reporter Ifran, who in 2019 stated, "The largest greenhouse gas emitters in the world, China, the United States, and India, offered either nothing or very little about their commitments to curb emissions on Monday at the United Nations Climate Action Summit, a gathering explicitly convening to push countries to do more to fight against climate change." According to Ifran, China and India have kept their economic goals such as renewable energy expansion in compliance with the Paris Agreement's stricter climate plans known as NDCs, but both are now on track to reaching the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. Unfortunately, our U.S. President Trump adds on to the disappointment of the UN Action Summit by saying he wishes to leave the 2015 Paris Agreement, openly declaring his contempt for policies that try to limit greenhouse gas emissions. But fortunately, not all hope is lost because there are many countries in compliance with the UN's plan to prevent further climate change. However, despite me saying the obvious need to force our respected nations to comply with such dire plans to save humanity, one must actively preach what he practices. Therefore, I offer you all small solutions to prevent climate change at your own homes. Though they may not stop climate change immediately, these solutions must be practiced by the majority of humans today to foster eco-friendly governments worldwide gradually through individual ripple effects. One of the ways we can help reduce the pollution in the world and reverse pollutants' negative effect on the environment is to switch to reusable water bottles, one that is made for long-term commitment, such as a hydro flask. Editor of One Green Planet, Kate Good, cites how Americans consume about 50 billion water bottles a year, and that our water bottles end up accounting for a large majority of the 8.8 million tons of trash that ends up in our oceans every year. But if Americans switch to a reusable water flask, then people can save up to 116 bottles annually. So the more Americans who do this, then the more plastic we can save from entering our ocean each year. Another way we can gradually help the environment is by growing our own domestic vegetable gardens. According to What Are the Environmental Benefits of Growing Your Food? Triangle Pest Control asserts, by growing your own food, you are hoping to reduce the higher amounts of burning fossil fuels that fill our environment as a result of importing foods from commercial farmers. By growing your own garden, you are the one to decide what goes onto your plants and into your soil, allowing you to reduce the amount of harmful chemicals polluting our environment and waterways. The final way I urge you all to help with climate change is by picking up your trash. This is because, according to Brooks and her colleagues in a 2018 excerpt from a Journal of Litter and Environmental Quality, Keep Britain Tidy found that people are more likely to litter where litter is present. The presence of litter can therefore act as an environmental cue and a social cue, implying a level of social acceptability towards littering at the site. This literally means that people tend to litter where litter is already rampant. So let's make our communities cleaner so that everybody becomes hesitant to see them soiled by littering. As stated, my friends, we must all act together as humans to overcome the challenge we have presented for ourselves by participating in the global consumption of past decades. We must go green or vanish amongst natural catastrophes. Remember that our planet's natural carbon limit has been surpassed, which is responsible for the natural disasters we see today and tomorrow. Remember that there is a countdown to our planet's doomsday. Remember that numerous citizens and leaders still suspect great change is not yet imminent. And finally, remember that change should only be advocated by those who practice it every day. Do your part, and everyone shall join alongside you, and eventually so shall our world leaders. Thank you.